Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 05, Episode 11, as we open Daniel Goleman's Focus to explore why some individuals effortlessly tune into the unseen rhythms of human connection, while others remain blind to the most obvious social cues. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of social sensitivity, that incredible ability some of us have to pick up on the subtle nonverbal messages people send, and why others seem to miss them entirely. It's really about how we navigate the unspoken rules of human interaction.
Indeed. And we'll try to unpack some of the science behind why some people just get social cues, while for others, these crucial signals are completely invisible. We'll explore the neural underpinnings, the impact of culture, and even how our social standing, our sense of power, profoundly influences our ability to connect and understand others.
Okay, so let's unpack this captivating topic and discover what Daniel Goleman's work reveals about this often overlooked, yet critical aspect of human intelligence. Let's maybe start with a scenario many of us can relate to. Have you ever been in a conversation where you're subtly trying to signal it's time to wrap up? Maybe shifting your weight, glancing at the door, changing your tone slightly. But the other person just keeps talking, completely oblivious. Goleman even shares this story about a freelance editor who, no matter what cues he sent, saying, "I've got to run now," taking out car keys, literally heading for the door, she would just keep right on chatting.
Yeah, it's funny, but what's fascinating here is that this common experience points to a concept Goleman calls social dyslexia. It's essentially a blindness to the unspoken cues, the ones that indicate a conversation is winding down, or maybe, that someone's feeling a bit uncomfortable. And the opposite, he calls social intuition, which is our accuracy at decoding that constant, subtle stream of nonverbal messages.
Okay, so given how much we rely on spoken words, how much weight do these nonverbal signals truly carry? Are they just like little add-ons, or can they sometimes really, override what we're actually saying?
Oh, they absolutely can. Goleman emphasizes that in situations like job interviews, for instance.
Okay.
If an applicant moves in sync with the interviewer, and this isn't intentional, right? It's a natural byproduct of brain synchronization, they're far more likely to get hired. So this becomes a real problem for people scientists call gesturally dysfunctional individuals who struggle to get the body language right, the movements that should naturally annotate what they're saying.
Right, and that raises an important question. What happens when someone consistently misses these cues? Not just in an interview, but, day to day. The book shares this quite compelling, maybe slightly awkward example with Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband. He apparently admitted to being an expert in odontopedology.
Yes. Which he defined as the science of putting your foot in your mouth. Goleman recounts his infamous gaffe in Nigeria. The president is there, dressed proudly in traditional robes for this big state visit, and Prince Philip apparently says, "You look like you're ready for bed."
Oh, dear.
Exactly. And it's quite telling, he once wrote to a family friend and seemed genuinely remorseful, saying, "I am rude and unmannerly, and I say many things out of turn, which I realize afterwards must have hurt someone. Then I am filled with remorse, and I try to put matters right."
Wow. I think we've all had those moments, maybe not quite on that scale, but putting our foot in it. So what Goleman seems to be implying is that this isn't just an occasional slip-up for some people. It often reflects a deeper, deficient self-awareness. People who are really tuned out socially, they stumble into these things, and they're genuinely surprised when told they've acted inappropriately. Talking too loudly, maybe, or being unintentionally rude. Their actions tend to make others feel uneasy, and they just don't seem to grasp why. So it sounds like consistently missing these cues often stems from a genuine lack of self-awareness. Okay, but what's really fascinating is why. Why does this happen? The book takes us deeper here, into the brain itself, to understand the sort of neural wiring behind social sensitivity.
Indeed. Richard Davidson, who's a prominent researcher in this area, uses a brain test that focuses on the fusiform face area. This is a neural zone specifically dedicated to recognizing and, importantly, interpreting faces. So when people are shown photos of faces and asked to identify the emotion, their fusiform face area shows activity. It lights up. As you'd expect, those with high social intuition show significant activity there. But conversely, those whose attention just doesn't seem to pick up the emotional wavelength, well, they show much lower levels of activity.
And what about more extreme cases, like, say, autism? How does that fit on this spectrum of neural activity?
Right. In individuals with autism, there's typically very little activity in that fusiform face area. Instead, you often see heightened activity in the amygdala. That's the brain region we know processes fear and anxiety. So for them, looking at faces, especially looking into someone's eyes, tends to actually induce anxiety.
Mm.
And this is really critical because, small children normally learn a huge amount about emotions just by watching another person's eyes. When eye contact is avoided, which is common with autism, those crucial lessons about emotional expression often get missed, like, for instance, those little crow's feet wrinkles around the eyes. They're a key, subtle cue that tells us someone is genuinely happy. A smile without them often signals faked joy.
But it's not just about autism, is it? Goleman makes the point that everyone falls somewhere on this dimension of social awareness. He mentions this manager who was accused of sexual harassment 3 separate times and was genuinely stunned each time. He had absolutely no idea he was acting inappropriately. These gaffe-prone individuals, as Goleman calls them, they seem to miss the implicit ground rules for a situation. They don't pick up the signals that they're making others uneasy. And Goleman suggests this might be because their insula, that key brain region for processing our internal bodily states, linked to empathy and self-awareness, seems to be out of the loop. It fails to register that internal unease that should signal a social misstep.
Yeah, exactly. These are the people who might, blithely check their text messages during a solemn moment of silence, completely unaware of the social transgression. But the book also offers a hopeful counterpoint. It tells the story of a woman who was actually too sensitive to nonverbal messages. She'd often blurt out embarrassing observations because she couldn't filter them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and she found that mindfulness meditation helped her gain inner awareness. After a few months, she reported being able to make a conscious choice about her reaction. She still saw the cues, but didn't need to react immediately. She called it gaining a valuable new freedom.
That's fascinating. So, okay, it's clear individuals vary a lot in their social radar. But let's broaden out a bit. Are there situations where pretty much anyone might struggle to read the room, regardless of their innate sensitivity?
Yeah, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about travel. We're all prone to inadvertent gaffes when we go to a new culture. We start out effectively blind to a whole fresh set of unspoken ground rules. Goleman gives this vivid example of a European trekker wandering around a monastery in Nepal wearing short shorts, completely unaware that, from the Nepali cultural perspective, this was a major transgression.
Right, that's a great illustration. And in today's global economy, you can see how the sensitivity to unspoken norms becomes absolutely critical for business. Goleman mentions learning the hard way himself in Japan about the business card exchange, the Meishi Kokan. It's a deeply important ritual. You don't just casually stuff a card in your pocket. You take it carefully, hold it with both hands, study it respectfully, put it in a special case. He notes many Americans tend to just pocket it without a glance.
And this cross-cultural talent, this social sensitivity, it's strongly linked to what psychologists call cognitive empathy, the ability to understand another person's perspective. Executives who are good at perspective taking, they tend to do much better in overseas assignments precisely because they pick up these implicit norms quickly. They learn the unique mental models of a given culture without needing everything spelled out.
And even within our own culture, these ground rules shift dramatically depending on who we're with, right? I mean, there are
Well,
jokes you tell your best friends that you would never tell your boss.
precisely. This attention to context is what lets us pick up the subtle social cues that guide our behavior, often without us even thinking about it. Those who are really tuned in know not just what to say and do, but maybe even more importantly, what not to say or do. They instinctively follow what Goleman calls a universal algorithm for etiquette, basically behaving in ways that put others at ease, navigating those hidden social minefields gracefully. And while some norms are conscious, learned rules, attention to these implicit norms is largely intuitive. It's a bottom-up capacity, he says.
Meaning?
Meaning it's often automatic, unconscious processing. It doesn't require deliberate thought. It often shows up as a gut feeling, that visceral felt sense in our body when we're socially off, even if we can't immediately say why.
And the brain's involved here too, I assume. Goleman mentions a brain test for context focus that looks at the hippocampus.
Yes, exactly. The anterior zone of the hippocampus, working closely with the prefrontal cortex, actively suppresses impulses to do something inappropriate for the current situation. Richard Davidson hypothesizes that people who are most alert and adept at navigating social situations have stronger activity and connectivity in these specific brain circuits. The hippocampus is what helps you instinctively act differently with your family than at work, or behave one way in the office versus, say, with workmates at a casual bar after hours.
So this context awareness isn't just about not messing up. It also extends to understanding social networks, like mapping who's who in a group, allowing you to navigate relationships, maybe even influence people effectively. Goleman notes that people good at organizational influence can intuitively sense the flow of personal connections. They can even name whose opinions really carry weight.
It definitely does. But again, you see the extremes when this contextual awareness is lacking. Goleman mentions a video game champion who spent so much time glued to his computer, he was genuinely baffled that a restaurant was busy on Valentine's Day.
Right. He just didn't get the context.
Exactly. Or think about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. A person might react to a completely innocent event as if it were a dire emergency. And tellingly, Goleman points out the hippocampus actually shrinks in people with PTSD. But remarkably, it grows larger again as their symptoms improve, which really highlights its crucial role in processing context correctly.
Okay, let's shift gears now to maybe an even deeper level of these social dynamics. Goleman introduces a really powerful concept: how social status and power fundamentally influence our social sensitivity.
Yeah, this raises a really important question. How does having power or lacking it affect our very ability to perceive and connect with other people? Goleman shares this incredibly moving story of Miguel, a day laborer. He worked a long, hard day and then was just refused his pay. In a Theater of the Oppressed workshop, a volunteer tried to reenact his situation, suggesting Miguel should just, reason with the employer. But Miguel, watching his own story being told, just started weeping uncontrollably. He knew that approach was completely impossible for someone in his position, an immigrant day laborer. It might work for a middle-class citizen, but not him. He said he realized how oppressed he was until he saw his own story told by someone else.
Wow, that's incredibly impactful. That contrast just vividly highlighted how it felt to be unseen, unheard, unfelt.
Mm-hmm. And Brent Blair, the director of that program, notes that a subtle but really potent force dividing people is that the powerful tend to unconsciously tune out the powerless. And that inevitably deadens empathy. Blair even experienced this himself. He was at a global conference, asked a CEO known for cutting wages a provocative question about paying healthy wages. And the CEO just completely ignored him, made him feel like a non-person.
So this ability of powerful people to just dismiss inconvenient people, inconvenient truths, simply by not paying attention. This has become a major focus for social psychologists.
Absolutely. Their research, particularly work by Dr. Keltner at Berkeley, shows a really clear and compelling relationship between power and who we choose to pay attention to. And it makes a certain kind of sense, right? Those with fewer resources, like people experiencing poverty, they depend much more on having good relationships. They need to lean on people, as Keltner puts it. So they become particularly attentive to others and their needs, almost as a survival mechanism.
Which suggests, then, that the wealthy, who can often just hire help for various needs, can perhaps afford to be less aware of other struggles or subtle cues.
Precisely what the research suggests. Keltner's studies even picked up on this subtle disdain in just a 5-minute get-acquainted session between college students. Wealthier students showed fewer signs of engagement, less direct eye contact, fewer responsive nods, less genuine laughter. Instead, they showed more signs of disinterest, like checking the time or fidgeting. Students from poorer backgrounds, on the other hand, appeared significantly more engaged, warmer, more expressive.
So this points to a pretty counterintuitive finding. The more powerful you feel, maybe the less empathic you actually become.
That certainly seems to be the trend in the research. A Dutch study, for example, found that when pairs interacted, the person assigned more power consistently tended to be more indifferent. They literally felt less of the other person's pain when it was simulated. Keltner's group found similar attention gaps just by comparing high-ranking people in an organization with those in lower tiers. They tested their skill at reading emotions just from facial expressions, and consistently, high-power individuals tend to focus their gaze less on others, they interrupt more frequently, and they often monopolize conversations, all signals of a fundamental lack of attention to the other person.
That's an astonishing correlation. So this isn't just a subjective feeling. It seems like there might even be quantifiable metrics for this power-attention link.
It's really quite remarkable. This mapping of attention along lines of power even shows up in a surprisingly simple metric: email response time. Goleman cites studies indicating that the longer someone takes to answer an email, the more relative social power that person generally wields.
Seriously, just from email response times.
Yeah. Columbia University developed an algorithm, they called it automated social hierarchy detection, and they used it on the massive Enron Corporation email archive. And just by analyzing how long it took people to answer emails, it correctly identified top-level managers versus their subordinates.
That's incredible.
It is. And Goleman notes that intelligence agencies are apparently applying the same kind of metric now to piece together chains of command and influence in groups like suspected terrorist cells.
So power and status, then, are highly relative. It varies from one encounter to another, and that directly impacts our attention.
That seems to be the key takeaway. When those same students from wealthy families were asked to imagine talking with someone of even higher status than themselves, guess what? They actually improved their ability to read emotions in faces. It suggests that where we perceive ourselves on the social ladder in any given moment profoundly determines how much attention we pay. We become more vigilant, more attentive when we feel subordinate, and significantly less so when we feel superior.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us, for you listening? This deep dive into Daniel Goleman's Focus really highlights that social sensitivity isn't just about, being polite or having good manners. It's a really complex interplay of quite sophisticated brain functions, nuanced cultural contexts, and even our fluid place in the social hierarchy at any given moment.
It really underscores the profound impact of all those nonverbal cues, the subtle power dynamics that constantly shape our interactions, often completely without us realizing it, and the ability to genuinely perceive and respond to others' unstated feelings, their inner world. It isn't just a nice-to-have social skill. It's fundamental to navigating the social world successfully and really to fostering meaningful human connections.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that tuning into those unseen rhythms of human connection allows us to bridge divides, to cultivate empathy, and ultimately to truly understand one another on a much deeper level.
And if we connect this back to the big picture, Goleman offers this really profound thought, a kind of truth emerging from his work. The more you genuinely care about someone, the more attention you instinctively pay to them. And in this beautiful kind of feedback loop, the more attention you pay, the more you naturally come to care. Attention, in its purest form, deeply interweaves with empathy, with connection, perhaps even with love itself.
A truly thought-provoking idea to leave you with, and maybe a quiet reminder of the simple yet profound power of just paying attention. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.